This hot, this the spot. There it is, pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a podcast for creatives of the comedy variety. I change that every week. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very fun episode. Why don't you follow us on Twitter or Facebook at There It Is Pod. You can also go to our website, thereitispod.com, look at some old blogs, and support the podcast. If you're listening to this on iTunes or SoundCloud, leave a review and share it with friends. This is such a fun episode. When I started this podcast, I've said this once or twice before. When I started this podcast, it was to have discussions like the one I'm going to share with you today. It was so encouraging, so insightful, very informative. It is with the one and only Jimmy Carrane, the Chicago improviser and instructor. He also hosts Improv Nerd, a huge podcast, really wonderful podcast. I was very thankful that he took the time out of his day to do this interview with me. He was very gracious. He was a great guy. Well, enough chatting about the chat. Let me just give it to you now. Here's my talk with the one and only Jimmy Carrane. We actually met once in Chapel Hill. It was the Soundbites Festival when you were there with Improv Nerd. And it was very brief. It was on the sidewalk, and I was standing waiting to get a cheeseburger I was standing on the sidewalk waiting to get a cheeseburger, and you walked past. So it was very brief, but we actually met once.
Was I nice?
You were very nice. You could tell that you were very nice. Before I spoke to you, when you were just at the other end of the sidewalk, just at the corner of the sidewalk walking towards, I said, he's trying to get somewhere, so just say a quick hello. I could just tell by how fast you were walking that you had somewhere to be.
Well, I was a Chicago guy in North Carolina, so I probably stuck out.
Oh, well.
But sometimes when I teach those, like I'll go in, and I love going to, different cities and teaching improv, but it's really a condensed schedule. So like I'll go in, I think that I was teaching 2 3-hour workshops, and then I was doing an Improv Nerd that night, or had done an Improv Nerd the night before. So it's like, it's really intense. So I'm always afraid that like I'll see people that have just taken the workshop and I'll forget their name, or they'll see me in a restaurant and I'll be rude or something.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm usually under a lot of pressure.
Well, you were incredibly warm when you greeted me, so I could tell that you were a nice person.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so don't worry about that. You were definitely I know it's the South where there's all this talk about Southern hospitality, but you were definitely very warm and kind when we met, and seemed outgoing. You didn't brush me off or anything. You're very cool.
Well, thank you.
And so how is it when you're traveling and instructing people, and as you said, it's a condensed schedule. So is it kind of hard to really get to the meat of things sometimes with improvisers?
Well, I got to tell you something, and I think I've just been blown away, with touring. Probably in the last 3 years, I've been to, I don't even know the number of places, but it's so amazing, the talent and the training that's going on across the country.
Right.
So that's like really, really cool. So to answer your question, since the students are at such a high level of getting training now, even in smaller markets, that it's not that difficult to get to the meat of stuff, and it's just so cool. Like after they've done taking a workshop, saying, "Oh, we love what you do," or we've never felt this close to each other, or we're really bonded. So, where did I was down in Miami, and we did like a 2.5 hour workshop. Typically I'll do a 3-hour workshop, and we got to it. So,
oh, wow.
I'm hoping in about 10 years I can do it in 10 minutes.
When, A couple of friends of mine who've taken workshops with you were saying, "Oh, that was incredible. He was so great." So you are definitely reaching people. And
Well, that's good to know, because you don't know all that you do when you go to different cities, and you don't know, you really don't know until when you get back, and then you get emails and Facebook messages saying, that was awesome, that was incredible, stuff like that.
I'm really glad that that's the experience you're having, because if I were trying to teach a group and this was the only chance I had to teach that group and I felt like I wasn't reaching them, that would be incredibly frustrating, wouldn't it?
Yes. I think the thing is, I've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I just did a group, it was basically psychiatrists. And, if you've listened to the podcast Improv Nerd, I love therapy. I'm in therapy and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun, which it was a lot of fun. But in the middle of it, we were doing very simple games, and therapists, as a rule, can be in their head. They're very analytical.
Right.
They can be like, they can, in this conference, that I was at, there's a lot of like, oh, let's bat around an idea and see who's right. So it's kind of the opposite of yes and in agreement with improv.
Right.
And, there was a point during the, and we were doing one word story, which is, just a very simple game. And I'm like, they were struggling with it. And I'm like, right at that moment, I have to adjust my expectations. So wherever I go, I am always, and that's hard for me, because if you've taught games as long as I have certain games, you have this expectation. And it's great to let go while you're teaching, let go of your expectations and go, okay, this is what they can do. I am not going to force them to do something they can't do.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great approach to take in. It reminds me of the approach Sharna Halpern took, because I was talking to her about the workshop and how it was described in the pamphlet that we had. And she said, yeah, I don't know what they wrote in there. I'm not doing that. I've been doing this for so long. I know how to get an assessment of the people who are there taking the workshop and figuring out in the moment, okay, this is what they need to learn. That just comes with experience, right?
It does come with experience. It also comes with trusting yourself. Mm-hmm. When I first started out teaching improv, I would go in and, I'd be working off a syllabus. Today, I don't do that. And I think I would say just like improvising, doing it on stage in front of an audience, it takes, as people know, it takes years to get good, mm-hmm. And I love Miles Stroth. There's a quote that he let us use for the book Improvising Better, which I co-wrote with Liz Allen about probably close to 8 or 9 years ago. And it said, it took him 5 years to stop sucking. I'm probably paraphrasing that. But the same goes for teaching improv. And I would say probably in the last 5 or 6 years, I just go in and I improvise along with the class. And I think because that's what we do. We're teaching improv. And so we're also modeling for our students what we want them to do. So if you go in with a syllabus and say, okay, we got to do this, and we got to hit this exercise. And that's how I did it for years and years. And really, it wasn't until the last 5 or 6 years where I'm like, you know what? I'm just improvising along with them. I know certain exercises I'm going to start out with, but if they take me down a different path, I'm going to follow them. Just like if somebody initiated something in a scene, I'm going to follow my partner. And it's made me a much better teacher, and it's made it a much more collaborative process, and it's just a much more fun process.
Wow, that's so helpful for me, because I just finished teaching a 101 class. This Monday was the first time I've truly taught a class. I did a couple of workshops before, and I've coached before, and I'm coaching a team now, and I use a syllabus. And I realized the first time I ever coached that the direction I was trying to take everyone was not really the best direction for them. And I quickly learned the hard way why having this plan isn't really the best thing. And improv coaching.
And I'll share a tip that that's really worked for me, but you really have to come from a place of confidence. I encourage my students to, this is not a lecture class, this is an ongoing dialogue. So whatever comes up for you, like if you feel you're in your head or you hate me or you're frustrated with an exercise or it feels mechanical, I really encourage my students to speak up and voice that, because that's something I didn't have when I was starting out. But more importantly is that can get that by speaking it can free you up. If you feel like if I get in class and go, I had a bad day, I'm judging myself, or I feel I'm in my head, by just speaking it, that's going to free you up. So that's like really important. But the tip that I use, if I'm lost as a teacher, and it's usually when I'm lost, meaning like, do I want to do group scenes or do I want to do two-person scenes? Last Wednesday in my Artist Low comedy class, I said, this is the beginning of the class. We do the warm-ups, and then I said to these guys, would you like to work with emotions today, or would you like to work with environment? And so I took a group conscience at the beginning, and people said, let's do emotions. So when I'm lost myself, I turn it over to the class. Now, here's the thing that I've learned is, give them a choice. Don't go, I'm lost, I don't know what to do.
What do you want to do?
Right. Then you're going to lose. You'll lose some of your authority and some of your power. But if you're like, I think they either want to do this or they want to do that, but I'm not really that sure. Let's ask them and let's have that dialogue, because it's an improv class and we're all making it up as we go along.
Right. I think that's brilliant. I think that's so helpful. And I think the times when I've gotten out of my head and off of my syllabus, I was connecting with them better too.
Oh, and I can't tell you, there is nothing more exciting than somebody goes, oh, I'm struggling with, I don't know what it is. And then right there you go, okay, I want two people up, and you're improvising an exercise based on whatever their issue is.
Right.
That to me is like, I leave that class with a performance high.
Oh, that's great. That's really cool. I feel like in order for me to do that as well as others is to really kind of know a lot of different exercises or games that people can do or warm-ups that people can do, and then they can just come to me on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, my head is so I'll forget exercises. I have a couple really good exercises that here's another thing is that I've learned. If you can get them to the whole thing about being, it's an ongoing conversation and it's not a lecture. I've had more students give me games that I wasn't even aware of. And there's two games in particular. Pete Byrne, who was a student of mine, he was out of Rochester. He's in Chicago now. There was just two great games. And one of the games he had, two people would get on stage and they would just repeat the name. So, it would be Bill, Fred, Bill, Fred, Bill, Fred, Bill, Fred, Bill, Fred. And they would make this really strong emotional connection before any plot or any dialogue was spoken. And you might repeat it 30 or 40 times. And there's this current that's created. There's this energy between the two partners, this tension. And then they go into dialogue and they create a scene and a two-person scene. And that game is just, I use that game all the time. And then there was another one he gave me, which was you do a 60-second scene. It's really to get people to start in the middle of a scene, get to the meat of the scene.
Right.
So you do 60 seconds, then you repeat it, the same scene for 45 seconds, then 30 seconds, then 15 seconds, and then 10 seconds. And both those games are they're really great games. I hope I'm explaining it right
it sounds like the last one sounds like we call it as Half-Life, and it's just you do a scene and you do it at half the time. And then again at half the time.
Yes.
And it's used as a game in a short form show. However, it's very good at learning how to get to the meat and to the crux of what a scene is.
Yeah. And you know what? I learned those games maybe 3 years ago. And you know what? I remember one of them, and I think it was the one we just described, the get to the meat of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, I just blanked out. And then one day in class, it just came back to me. So it's like, my head is so filled with games, and I forget them.
Yeah, and you don't know how that stuff is getting filed in your brain, and it just comes out at random times.
Yep. And also, you don't know. Michael Gelman, who I just was just a huge influence on me as a teacher when I was teaching at Second City. Mm-hmm. He had given me this game, which is another game that just I love teaching and people seem to love doing it. It's basically you get two people on stage. It's a two-person scene, and you give them a scenario. Something that's got some emotional weight to it. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're two high school kids and it's prom night and they lost their virginity. And instead of using words, they're going to use numbers. So they're going to say numbers 1 through 50. Mm-hmm. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7. And that's going to be the dialogue throughout the scene until they get to 50. Mm-hmm. And that game, it's an incredible game. But the interesting thing is Michael I was teaching at Second City at the time. And I love teaching at Second City because I love the community of Second City. And I also loved, they had a teacher's lounge and you could go back and say, look, I'm struggling with this. You got a game, or I don't feel like teaching tonight. What can I do? And people would give you stuff. And that was invaluable. So Gelman gives me this game, 2 years ago. And then I come back to him and I say, and Michael says, okay, this is the game. And this is where you're teaching it. Mm-hmm. And then, I said, hey, Michael, 2 years later, I've taught this game, and it was this is why I taught it. And Michael goes to me, well, really, you're teaching it for, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh. And then I felt shame, like, I had done it wrong. But what I had learned was, if you get a game, Jason, and I get a game, mm-hmm. we're going to, because just like just because we have different life experiences, we're going to use it totally different. And there is no right or wrong, for that.
Right, exactly. Because especially if you're teaching I would imagine if you're teaching or coaching a large group, there are going to be different dynamics in that group, and you're trying to reach a particular portion of that group for one thing, and you're maybe not trying to reach another portion of that group with that particular exercise, but it's maybe what the overall team needs.
Yeah, and the other thing is getting back to this thing of dropping expectations is, you may say, okay, I'm doing 1 through 50 for an emotional connection. But if you're in the moment and you see, well, you know what, this class really, they're fine with in the moment, maybe it's they're discovering a different use or a different focus or a different objective for the game. Mm-hmm. And as a teacher who's been teaching for a long time, that's the thing that can be really exciting, but it also can be frustrating because you need to let go and you need to learn from your students.
Yeah, that's the big thing that I need to really learn. I not that I'm not at all learning, but I think I could really put down that syllabus and get out of my head and say, what is it they are telling me right now? Let me listen to that and go with that. So essentially, when you're teaching, or are you coaching as well, or are you primarily?
I'm primarily teaching.
So you're basically diagnosing where people are. You're taking an assessment of where people are, and you're saying, here's what they could utilize right now, and here's an exercise that'll help them.
And you were talking earlier about really good teachers go in and they improvise their lesson plan, and you mentioned how Sharna approaches it, and I believe that really good teachers are assessing as you go along. It's almost like like when you're improvising a scene, there's 3 or 4 different things that are going on in your head. That's the same thing that's going on. Always in the back of my mind is me assessing what they need.
Right. That's so good. That's really helpful for me to hear. I want to go back a little bit to your beginnings in improv.
Sure. I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it because I've heard only a little bit. I get the impression you started out in the mid-'80s in mm-hmm. Chicago.
Correct.
and with some of the other big names of improv. I mean,
Yes.
that was a time period where just about everyone who is watching these great improvisers started. I mean, who were some of the people that you were starting out with?
Well, when I started it, when I started a place called the Players Workshop, the Second City, and at that time that was one of the few. I mean, believe it or not, there wasn't even in Chicago. There was only a couple places to study, and that was if you went to see a Second City show, which I had done, and you wanted to get into improv and take improv classes, that was the place they recommended you started, and that's where I started. And from there, I then went to the Second City. It really wasn't. It wasn't called the Conservatory. I think it might have been called the Training Center, and it was a 5-level program. And in my class, you'd put on a 5th level show. It was a Second City style review. Was Tim Meadows, and Tim Meadows then. He was the one who really turned me on to the Improv Olympic, now known as IO Chicago, right. And Tim took me to. It was one night. It was a Saturday night. We were hanging out after class. It was one of those, class was done at noon, and we were, we hung out, and we went that night to. It was there. Then it was at Cross Currents, the Improv Olympic, and. I got to play in a Herald, and I didn't know anything about Herald. He explained it was 3 scenes. Don't worry, and he took care of me.
Great.
And I know this scene. He was a cab driver, and I was a clown called Crib Death the Clown. And it was like one scene, great scene, second scene, great scene, and then the third scene. In those days, it was to try to bring it all together. And I remember being so pissed off that we didn't get to do that third scene because they tried to tie it together, which sometimes worked and sometimes most of the times didn't. But anyways. So then I started at the Improv Olympic, and that really was, for me, that was such a great place. And then I made when I was starting out, Andy Dick was on a team. I played with Andy, I think, a couple times. Andy was just crazy funny, always back then. Then I got into Dell's class, and I met Dave Keckner, and I'll never forget the first scene Dave and I did in. Dell's class. Now, Dell, if anybody doesn't know Dell Close, he was this legendary improv guru, worked with all the big names at Second City, from Bill Murray to the Belushis, then later Tina Fey,
Amy Poehler,
Amy Poehler.
Farley, yeah.
Yeah. So we did a scene, Dave and I. Now, Dell is this intimidating guy, deep voice, he coughs, clearing his throat a lot, and he can be mean. I mean, I would see him humiliate people in class. And
I heard a story Tina Fey told about doing a scene, and then with a couple people, and after the scene, he said, "What was that scene about?" And they tried to come up with an idea, and he said, "I think it was a scene about bad improv."
Yeah. And that was Tina was studying him with when he mellowed,
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and so you had two things going on. You were terrified that you'd be humiliated in class, and you desperately wanted his approval.
Oh, wow. So that's what kept people coming back.
Oh, yeah. And he gave you a lot of gifts. He gave me a lot of gifts. It could be very painful getting those gifts. So Dave and I did this scene, and it was 2 people, and we were staring out at the sun, and one person was going blind, and it was like every line, I'd say a line, Dave would get a laugh. Then I'd say a line, I'd get a laugh. It was like the perfect scene, right? And I just remember that great feeling after we were done with that, and getting, Dell was like heaping on the praise, And the thing about Dell that I have a ton of respect for, though, he would not play favorites. Another person that we started out with, who actually he was in Canada, was Mike Myers.
Oh, wow.
And it would be so interesting. Del wouldn't play favorites. If Myers did or anybody did something well, he would praise you. If you did something stupid, it didn't matter what you did the week before or what you even did the last scene in class, Del would call you on your shit. So wow. He had a very high threshold. And then when I was started to get on a house team and play regularly, Chris Farley and Ian Gomez and Brian McCann were on a team, and then all of a sudden with Armando, I was in the original cast of Armando, and that was just like that to me was the time with improv in Chicago, like the golden age of improv in Chicago, because you had Matt Besser, Matt Walsh, Ian Roberts, Amy Poehler. You had the four original UCB in that cast, I'm pretty sure. Neil Flynn from Scrubs, and then the middle was in that cast. Keckner was in that cast. Adam McKay was in that cast.
Wow.
John Glazer was in that cast. Kevin Dorff, Brian Stack, Noah Gregoropoulos. Laura Kraft. It was Miles Stroth. It was the family. Ali Faranakian. Wow. Armando was the monologist. It was. I apologize if I'm leaving anybody out, but it was like the culmination of improv in Chicago there, because you had the family, you had the UCB, the UCB 4, which a lot of them came from the family. You had a group I was in called Jazz Freddy. So Pete Gardner was, I believe, in Armando, and Miriam Tolan. So you had Jazz Freddy. You had all these people, and then people from the main stage. I know later Scott Adsit played.
Oh gosh,
so there was this conversion of improv in the 90s. It was a great time.
You got to see all these amazing people all the time and work with them all the time. And these are people that I richly admire and am inspired by.
I wish in retrospect I could have learned more from them. I think, you want to prove yourself. I did, and you're competitive and you're scared to death, because you feel like you're not talented enough. You can't really hang with them. And there's jealousy. I was probably jealous of most people I've ever worked with.
And I've heard you talk about that before. How does one, if someone's starting out now and they're in a big city and working in a theater that people are getting plucked from to be on SNL or The Daily Show, and they're not getting plucked from it, what advice would you give them to sort of relax and enjoy where they are now?
Well, I think, and again, it's something that I try to bring in my class, which is you speak it. I think jealousy, people are afraid to admit, I'm jealous of Tina Fey. I'm jealous of Amy Poehler. I'm jealous of Dave Keckner. I'm jealous of Mike Birbiglia. I just did an interview with him on Improv Nerd, and I said, Mike, I'm jealous of you. I'm not saying go and find those people that you're jealous of and say you're jealous to them.
Just be honest.
I think it may help down the road if it's a close friend. You go, I'm jealous of, if you have a good relationship with them, I'm really jealous that you got this. Because here's the thing about jealousy. If you got a TV show, right? Mm-hmm. I could be jealous, right? But it's not about you. It's about me.
Right.
That's the thing. Right. So to admit to somebody, get in therapy and admit it. Close friends that you trust, that you feel they're gonna keep it private, amongst yourselves, to them, and say, look, I'm really jealous of so and so, because what happened with me was, I think it comes out sideways on the stage. I did a wonderful show with Stephanie Ware from Mad TV. It was really an early 2-person improv show, and for 1 hour we did one scene. But she is one of the best people I have ever improvised with. I mean, she's a brilliant writer, a brilliant actor, and a brilliant improviser, and she can bring those all together on stage. And you can, for me, I was so jealous of her talent. And it came, I believe, subconsciously. It came, it manifested on stage. Had I been in therapy, had I been able to talk about it with somebody and not feel shame about being jealous, I believe it would have been a better experience for me, a better experience for her and the director and the audience and so forth. But I was so unaware of it that I really think jealousy can, it can make you do crazy stuff and you're not even, you don't even realize it.
I would 100% agree with that. And I think there's also a lot of kind of an acceptance of the great things around you. I mean, one of Conan O'Brien, I've said publicly before, he's my hero. And one of the things I love that he said was, if you work hard and you're kind, amazing things will happen to you. And when you get to perform with the people around you, and this is, I'm not speaking to you, I just mean the general you. If you're getting to perform an improv with all these amazing people around you and you're learning new things and you're seeing new things and having these great experiences, that's amazing things. Maybe I'm going up to New York and it'll be real hard to get on a house team and I may not get any attention when I'm up there. But what's definitely going to be true is that I'm going to meet amazing people and perform with amazing people and see amazing things. So I still need to take that from my experience in New York. I can't say, well, I didn't get on this show or that show and act like it's a wash. I still need to look at it and say, these amazing things happened and I worked hard and I was kind to people and these amazing things happened.
That's a really great attitude. For me, it was always, in the rearview mirror, when everybody migrated to New York or Los Angeles or, I left a show or I left a theater or they left a show and they left a theater. That's when I realized, I learned something from that. This was an amazing time. Mm-hmm. But, it's very hard. And this is me because I'm totally fucked up. I don't appreciate it until it's over.
Yeah, and I think most people are like that to a certain degree just because hindsight, as they say, is always 20/20. But, yeah, I wish I could be a little more present in the moment and appreciate what's going on and not get so in my head.
I think the other thing about, jealousy, and I'm glad we're getting an opportunity to talk about it, is then, so you get to admit it, I'm a big proponent of therapy and, if recovery, any sort of 12-step groups that you need help with, because I need all the help I can get. And then, so get all your help with that. And then create. The other great medication for jealousy is, why am I jealous of Mike Birbiglia? Well, Mike Birbiglia is doing everything that I would love to do, and he's successful at it, and he's nice about it, and he's a great guy, and he's super talented.
And I imagine Don't Think Twice also spoke to you in that regard too.
Oh my God, I cried. It was such a beautiful movie. I brought it up in therapy, and 2 weeks later, my therapist went and saw the movie and said, that's your life story, because I had an opportunity to go to Saturday Night Live and audition for the show. I had a plane ticket they had given me and a hotel room, and a lot of people were going to audition from Chicago, the improv community, and I blew it off. And because I didn't get any support and I didn't have a therapist and I didn't have friends that I could go to and say, look, I really don't want to do this. I probably, the lie is I did have friends I could go to. I had a hard time asking for help and trusting them. That's where I failed. And, people will say to me, I always end the podcast saying, one piece of advice, you give somebody in improv and comedy. My advice, is, find people that you trust, that you can bounce ideas off of. If I would have had a support system in place, I would have taken that audition to Saturday Night Live. And I'm not kidding you, Jason. I wouldn't have gotten Saturday Night Live. I'm almost positive. But that's not the point. The point is that I would have gotten out of my comfort zone. And every time you take a little risk on stage or in your life, the universe gets a little bigger. Mm-hmm. And so I know I wouldn't have gotten Saturday Night Live, but who knows what other opportunities would have come just by taking that risk. So getting back to the jealousy thing, create your own stuff. Do what Mike Birbiglia is doing. He's creating his own stuff. He's made his own path. And there is a great article in the New York Times of, I think it was like 6 tips to, making it small in Hollywood. And that guy has done it. And so look up that article.
I saw that article and it is great.
But creating your own stuff is great medication. It is great medication. When I create my own stuff, you start talking less about people. You're more focused. You're happier.
Yeah.
You have a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Have you read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic?
No.
Oh, I think you should read that. It's touching on the stuff that you're talking about. It's called Big Magic, and it talks about living a creative life and what that really means. And it's not about chasing fame and all the stardom or anything like that. It's living a creative life could be something that you quietly do, but it's something that's good for you to do.
Well, that gives me hope because, as you know, if you've listened to the podcast, I'm obsessed. I'm less obsessed with fame, but I always feel like fame and success and money is going to complete me. And, I can tell you intellectually it won't, but there's still a part of me that's like, I really think, if I become famous, it's going, I'm going to live happily ever after.
But you are famous.
Yeah, but I'm not famous to the level.
Okay, I get you're not like George Clooney or Matt Damon famous.
Compliment. Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I am famous. Yes.
You are. I mean, when I told people that I had you on, they had a very big "oh my God" response. Like that's amazing. That's great. Good for you. I mean, that you're a big get for me.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, you and Sharna now are the ones. Like whenever I get a name like a Jimmy Carrane, I lead with that one. I was like, hey, I interviewed this person. Can you do the interview now? Can you do this podcast for me?
Right. Jimmy did it. Sharna did it. You should do it too. Right. We call that bandwagoning.
Absolutely. I will shamelessly do it. Seriously.
I do it all the time. And the bigger the people you get, it's just how it works.
Yeah. Speaking of podcasting and, where you are and your ability to get big names, you've had some of the biggest names in the comedy community, and you've had such great interviews with them. I love the one that you did with Jon Favreau, and there are countless great ones. What is the learning process in that? What if someone's wanting to start out a podcast of their own? What are the things you could tip them off on?
Okay, what I would suggest, I had 10 years of public radio experience, so I knew how to put an interview together and do some research and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I would say. And you're doing it. You're doing a lot of stuff really well.
Thank you.
But the biggest thing is if you're going to do an interview show, because I can only speak about interview shows. Prepare. Do some preparation. That is huge. Because that's going to show. And so that's number one. Number two is. Nobody's just going to find it. So if you think that, like when I started, I'm like, oh, I'm going to, I was an idiot. I was so stupid and so ignorant. Like I really thought in terms of interview, comedy, podcast, it was me and Mark Maron and that was it. Uh-huh. And it would just be months before, I had as many downloads and, Mark Maron and I traded off the number one spot on the iTunes list. Mm-hmm. That has never happened. But so I was really clueless. So promote it. That's the other thing. I mean, I'm promoting endlessly the podcast when the episodes come up on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm in a lot of groups, make sure that it gets out to a lot of groups. And, to add on to that is know what your niche is in your market. again, I was such an idiot. I'm like, oh, everybody knows improv. Well, everybody doesn't know improv. Improv's a very small community, and
Yeah.
probably in retrospect, I would have made it, broader and done comedy. But
Hmm.
so know what your niche is, and then exploit that niche. So for me, exploiting that niche means, okay, it's improvisers. Where are their improvisers? Okay. They're on Facebook groups. Okay. So make sure you get in the Facebook groups, and when they come out, put it out there. Because podcasting today, and if you go to iTunes and look up the 200 top podcasts, they range from everything.
Right.
So find what your niche is, and then just exploit that niche.
Before I launched this podcast, I learned a lot by paying attention to what you were doing with Improv Nerd. I was going to the Twitter account and looking at how you all tweeted, and I just looked online at a lot of different podcasts and how they did online stuff, and that helped me a lot.
Well, thank you. And the other thing that you did well, and it was the best $100 I ever spent, was like you have like a really good web presence. You have a good logo, and we spent like $100 on those orange glasses, and
It looks really cool.
Right. Thank you, and it's really slick. Well, that so you asked me to do your podcast, and I'm like, well, I don't know Jason Farr. And the thing is, and you said Sharna had done it, so I'm like, okay, so bandwagoning, Sharna did it, so it's that makes it okay for me to do it, right? Mm-hmm. Then I go to your web presence, and I'm impressed with your web presence and your logo. Now I'm buying into doing this interview, and how that translates to improv groups and is do it the same way. I've gotten to direct a lot of great improv groups here in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And people will ask me all the time about my advice. And I say the same thing. I'm a broken record. Be as professional and get as much of the details, the business stuff lined up first. So, if you want to do an improv, you have an improv team or even a sketch group, find the venue. All right. Mm-hmm. And then, find the coach or the director, and then go to the people that you want and say, these are my expectations. And it's not usually one person doing it. If you can get multiple people to do it, you're gonna succeed really quickly. Mm-hmm. So say, okay, all right. So we've got the venue, and okay, we're expecting you to rehearse twice a week for 3 hours, and we've got John Lutz is our director, and we're going to pay John X amount of dollars, and each player needs to come up with $100. Mm-hmm. We're also we also expect you to promote on Facebook and to tell your friends and get people that where you work to come, and your family members to come. All those expectations, the more professional you can be in anything, and especially in the improv community, because we are lazy.
Not as lazy as stand-ups.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. I think on improviser's tombstone they should say, all I wanted to do was play. All I want to do is do the show.
Yeah.
But those aren't the people that get ahead.
Right.
Because doing your own stuff, producing your own stuff, that's the thing that's going to separate you from everybody else, and that's going to give you control, and that's going to give you power. And if you do those things, just those three things of like get the director, get the venue, tell them what the expectations are in terms of promotion, in terms of rehearsals and stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be those three things, but you get your expectations out in front, you are going to attract, especially if you have a little talent, you are going to attract people, because I can tell you this, my experience with groups, it really does work. And in my own life, it's worked. The opportunities that I've gotten, Improv Nerd, I created that. I mean, with other people, I've got a team of people that do it now, that help me do it. I didn't have that when I started. But once you create something, people look at you differently.
Yeah, that's very true. This has been such a great talk. I have learned so much, and I know that the people listening are learning so much too. So thank you so much for doing it. We have reached the end of the episode, so here's our opportunity to create something together.
Great.
What's something we could do together? What's something we could come up with?
What's in your head that you'd like to create?
That's a good question. So I'm trying to meld everything that we talked about together. So what if we were creating a podcast? What would we create?
What would we create together? Well,
we're both already doing what we would do, so maybe that's a hard one to figure out.
How about let's talk about your trip to New York.
Okay.
And let's prepare you for your trip to New York.
All right, I'm gonna go up this coming Friday. We're gonna go up there for 5 days. So this will be good.
Okay, so but you're planning. We
are planning to move there in February. Yes.
You're just gonna go there for 5 days. Is that correct?
Yes. In a few days, I'm going there for 5 days, and then in February, I'm moving there.
Okay, so let's create how we can get the most out of this trip.
Okay.
Okay, so you know that you're going to move in February, right?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know what if money and time were no object, we'll call this a vision, your vision here. I didn't make that up. So if money and time were no object, what do you want to accomplish in New York?
I want to get better as a performer, and that's a stand-up, and as an improviser, and as a writer. And I want to get to be viable enough to where I could work professionally in the entertainment industry. Okay.
And do you know what that job would be? Like your ultimate job?
Ideally, I guess a comedic actor, but an on-camera performer. I'll word it that way, because I guess I could also see myself hosting something.
So you want to be in front of the camera. Whatever it is, you could be hosting something, you could be in a sitcom, you could be in a movie.
That's the childhood dream that's never died in me. However, I would love to write. I would love to write for a late night talk show.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have two things here, right? Mm-hmm. We've got writing for late night talk shows, which thank God there's opportunities in New York.
Yeah.
And then a comedic actor on camera, performing, hosting. You could do something on. Do they still have MTV? I'm so out of touch.
The MTV is still in New York, I believe.
Okay. So you could do that. All right. So, all right. Great. So we got the vision. So these 5 days, what do you have planned for 5 days when you're in New York?
Well, we were looking over things. We're going to see Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Okay, now how'd you get tickets?
I went online and signed up for the wait list, and then they sent me a message saying that we got tickets.
Okay, great. So you're going to see Stephen Colbert. All right.
And we're also going to go see the Roots Picnic.
No, what is that?
So the Roots, the band that
on Jimmy Fallon?
Roots crew on Jimmy Fallon, yes. They put on a concert, and it's like a 2-day concert. And we're going on the Saturday leg of the concert to see the Roots and D'Angelo and John Mayer, and we're really excited about that. But also I want to go see ASCAT so bad. So that's Sunday night at UCB, and there are 2 shows, and hopefully we'll be able to get into one of them.
Okay, and that those shows sell out, and you've got to get in line and stuff like that.
Right. I have to ask some people who live there how to get in and what's a good time to show up so you can get in, because I know there are 2 shows, and the second one's free, but when I saw that it was free, I said that's gonna sell out real quick.
Right. Okay. So and then so you've got all this. Is this trip for pleasure?
Well, originally when we planned it, yes, it was a fun pleasure trip, but then we decided to move there, so it's partly going to be scouting. So you're going to spend days looking in neighborhoods for apartments and stuff? I think just looking to see what feels right, and then probably not looking, I don't know if we'll be looking at apartments, but at least going to certain neighborhoods and saying maybe this would be the right neighborhood to live in, a safe neighborhood. We have a lot of friends there who can help us with that too. Oh, great. And I think also just trying to learn how to maneuver around the city.
Okay, great. Okay.
And I also want to go to the Pit and to Magnet, but I don't see how we can make everything work in 5 days.
Okay, great. All right. So that's what we've got for the 5 days. To me, like what I've seen, like people like who've interned for Improv Nerd, people have been able to network and make connections. And to me, it seems like you're somebody who's not afraid. I mean, you reached out to me, you reached out to Sharna. I think your strong suit, one of your strong suits is probably, and you got a great personality, is to network. Is this, I feel like I'm a psychic here. Is this right?
Oh, I would say so.
I think I don't know on this trip if you're going to have time, to network. But I mean, I know like Pitt has a bar. I mean, you could just go and, hang out there. Just to see it. I don't, I would find out where people go after ASCAT, other improvisers. Maybe the cast goes and hangs out somewhere. That's usually not the best place to like network, but
right.
I would just think, I think you got a real gift with that.
Well, thank you.
And I think that's what I've seen, like, you mentioned like I've gotten all these big names and comedy people, and it is a very impressive list, and I'm telling you, it's not easy, even after 5 years at 52 years old of age, to ask people to be on the podcast. But that though, and when I went out to try to sell the Improv Nerd as a TV show, I had to call a lot of people and ask for help, and people will help you. The hardest part is getting over your own self, that humility, that fear that I'm not good enough to ask for help. Do you have a lot of improviser friends out there now?
I have a handful, yeah, and then even just some old friends, and a old stand-up buddy is up there too. So
okay, you know what I would do? Okay, we're really trying. I would make it. And you can fit this into your schedule and tell me if this will work. Okay. I would get together with them. I would just get together with them and then ask them a ton, like questions. So when just go, hey, moving to New York, what would your advice be? What do I need to prepare myself? How do I, I don't know if I know getting on a Herald team at UCB is like one of the most competitive and one of the, hardest things and a huge accomplishment if you can do it. If that's, where should I study? This is the kind of improv I like. Stand up. Can you, because New York is different than where you are. What are the open mics I can get to? And so I would just and then I'd also take public transportation. New York has got great public transportation. I get a lay of the city, but I'd go if you could, even if you just went to Pitt for 20 minutes and looked in or whatever, and went in the front bar and or got to the Magnet. But I think sitting down, coffee or lunch with friends that are doing what you want to do and pick their brain is like, to me, that would make the most sense based on how much time you have.
Okay, very cool. Well, this was a very fun and very encouraging chat. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
You're welcome. And let me know how New York goes.
I absolutely will. And I think it'd be great to have you on again, too. I feel like I've only scratched the surface here.
It's a huge compliment because we've almost been on for an hour.
I know, yeah. I think it'd be so great to pick your brain some more and learn more from you. I have plenty more I could learn.
Yeah, and I have more to learn from you as well.
Oh, well,
because I never had the courage to go to New York or Los Angeles because I was afraid.
Well, you took the courage to go to Chicago.
Well, I was from Chicago, so I had the courage to go from the suburbs to Chicago and then back to.
Yeah. Okay.
Jason, it's been a pleasure to be on this podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and people that are listening, if you like what Jason's doing, check out Improv Nerd. It's on Feral Audio. We have over 200 episodes of people, improvisers. It's like a master class. So check that out, Improv Nerd at Feral Audio, or my website, jimmycarrane.com.
Great. Thank you so much.
Break a leg, man. Thank you.
There it is. What a fun interview. I very much enjoyed that. I know some of you are thinking, Jason, at the end there, he was just complimenting you. Why did we need to hear that? Fair question. I think it exemplified his posture and taking a nice posture with somebody. He was gracious enough, as every guest has been gracious with their time with me. And I appreciated that. But he really showed in a very good sort of model. He really modeled that kind of let me support posture. I mean, if you think about it, you might need to re-listen just to catch this, but he literally was saying yes and several times in that conversation. Like, that's so ingrained in him, that fundamental basic philosophy of improv, and he was utilizing it in his life with me. And it was so encouraging. He was giving all this information and so helpful. And I think that's great. I think he was exemplifying something that we all could use, which is being better at making the people around us look good and feel good and help them. Good on Jimmy Carrane. I'm really glad I had the chance to talk to him. Very thankful for this episode. As you heard him say, you can go to jimmycarrane.com. You can find out more information about him. Of course, go to Feral Audio and listen to all the podcasts on there. There are plenty of good ones. His is one of them, Improv Nerd. It really is a masterclass, as he said. You can also check out more about the podcast Improv Nerd on Twitter and Facebook, at Improv Nerd on Twitter. Really great resource of good information there. And you can also find out more about this podcast. Of course, I mentioned earlier, thereitispod.com and on Twitter, at thereitispod, as well as on Facebook. And if you want to support, please do. I very much would appreciate that. I hope you all have their-itis. Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of There It Is. And as Jimmy Carrane would say, another episode in the can. Next week's episode going to be a special one out of New York City. Get a rope. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.